So AVEVA Insight. So if you caught the presentation yesterday, it was definitely a good overview of what AVEVA Insight can do. But just to kind of recap or reiterate, so AVEVA Insight is a secure and managed cloud operations platform for your data. And that operations platform is hosted in Azure data centers. And kind of the overall goal or business value with any cloud solution is, lower IT and maintenance costs, versus on-premise solutions. And, for example, if you have, employees trying to VPN into the network to gain access, especially, during, COVID, maintaining or managing, that network traffic, VPNing into the system, does require some resource allocation. And then, we're hosting them in Microsoft's data centers versus, standing up on-premise servers and hosting solutions there. So you don't need to maintain that hardware. And in addition to the cloud offering, right, is that it's offered as software as a service. So as updates get rolled out, that update will just, or new content will appear at the, the next time you log in. You'll log in, you'll explore new features and gain new functionality and be able to, extensively use, the product that you already own. So how can you use AVEVA Insight? So there's a handful of ways of viewing the data. So the traditional way is, the browser client, which can be any HTML5 compatible browser. You have the native mobile app, which is free to download for any iOS or Android user. And then there's an Excel 365 add-in. So you can, similar to the on-premise Historian add-in or Historian Excel add-in, you can pull directly from AVEVA Insight into Excel, whether that be raw data or summary statistics data. You can pull that data into Excel. And then touching a little bit about the extensibility, the REST API to integrate with third-party products or bring in third-party data sources, as well as the BI gateway, which is our business intelligence gateway. So essentially, it's if you're familiar with our intelligence product, it's that same product, just hosted up in the cloud as well. So you can do some advanced analytics against your existing data. So supported data sources for AVEVA Insight are the AVEVA or Wonderware product line, and as well as third-party data sources. And how you can do that is through OPC data sources, JSON or CSV files, as well as MQTT data sources as well.
You're looking at SD. Okay, SD.
So kind of a sample or example architecture. So one example of how you could set this up is you have your process control network. And then, in some cases, customers have an existing DMZ zone or demilitarized zone. And in there, you stand up a computer if it's not there already, and install this free software that we provide called DMZ Secure Link. And what this does is a few different things. Is it first acts as a proxy to redirect the data that's being pushed out through a one-way firewall from the process control network, and ultimately through another one-way firewall out to the internet. And the data is all encrypted and secure. So even if the data was intercepted, you can't write back into the process control network. But once it gets pushed out, or I guess the other feature of it, besides acting as a proxy and securing the data, is that it whitelists only the necessary websites or URLs needed to run AVEVA Insight. And so that's managed by us. So as that list might change, a little bit as the software, changes and grows, you won't need to manage that whitelist. And then once you get the data out there, you can gain access and utilize all the client tools that I just mentioned previously. And so just kind of expanding a little bit on another possible architecture is, if you're using a tier 2 historian, which is our enterprise historian, essentially, a historian that accepts data from another historian, which would be a tier 1 historian. You can further create that separation between that process control network and the data and the internet accessible data via AVEVA Insight. So just very quickly before we get into the hands-on portion, so you have some dashboards and access on the mobile app. Here's a screenshot of what the mobile app might look like. You have that Excel add-in, again, for raw or summary statistics data. And what you also have is this condition management tool or feature. Essentially, the condition-based alerts, or alerts. And so with these multi-condition alerts, you can set the parameters and conditions and values, and even extend that functionality to custom actions. And what these custom actions do is they leverage logic apps that are generated in Microsoft Azure logic apps or AWS apps as well, and provide extensibility through those created apps. For example, the multi-condition alert gets activated, it's linked with this custom action in that logic app, and it'll send off a work order request to maybe an EAM solution like SAP, for example. And then what's actually fairly new to the cloud is leveraging predictive analytics. So we've had, as AVEVA, had this predictive analytics software for on-premise, but earlier this year released the capability to host this up in the cloud and leverage AVEVA Insight as your data source, and then doing supervised machine learning with this predictive analytics software in the cloud. So that being said, any questions before we hop into the VMs? Okay. So it seems like a handful of you have gotten access to your VM. So a couple of housekeeping items in terms of getting familiar with SkyTap. If you want to make your screen just kind of fill the entire monitor that you're working in, I'd recommend clicking on this multi-screen icon and then clicking full screen. And essentially just to avoid accidentally closing out the browser of the host machine itself. And if for some reason it didn't fit, the icon to the left will fit to window. You might not see some of these controls due to your permission access. So down at the bottom, you should see an Insight login notepad. And if this isn't here, it's also on the desktop as well. But you should have your email. For those who are still following along, this email and password we're going to use to log in to AVEVA Insight. It'll have plus, some integer value. @gmail.com, and all the passwords should be the same.
So
How you can get there is we'll go to our Chrome browser. I'll make this full screen. And there should be a saved bookmark for AVEVA Insight. Go ahead and click on that, online.oneover.com, and go ahead and sign in. And from here is where you'll use that Notepad login. It'll be wwca.california plus what number you are, and then at gmail.com. If you have more than one solution, you might not, so it might just take you straight to the home page and click Water Workshop. And for those who are following along, should be on something similar like this. Check. Okay. Seems like people have logged in. Great. That's good news. Anybody who is following along and has been unsuccessful to getting to this homepage? Okay. Okay, so to get familiar with AVEVA Insight, we have our homepage, we have our smart search bar. Think of it like a Google search. We have our suggested content tab, which is our recent pieces of content that we've either visited or created. And that's being viewed here. We have our news feed, which right now we just see comments from our previous session. But in addition to like user rights or user comments, it'll display like unusual events with the data. So for example, like if values are higher or lower than normal, they will be just, that event or result will be displayed in this news feed. And then we have this dashboard tab where all our saved dashboards. So right now we just have one dashboard, so if we want, we can drill into this. So select the Mixer dashboard if you're following along. And so this is a dashboard that I've created beforehand. So just to kind of summarize what you kind of see here is we have this analog summary statistics data for a couple analog tags. Just to preface, I know this is a water wastewater workshop, and I was planning on having a water specific demo for this first session. On the other sessions, it is water specific. But my water demo kind of got all wonky, and so I had to audible to this mixer data. So I apologize for that. That being said, everything should still apply, in generality, in terms of what you can do, what the data will look like. So we have this mixer process graphic, which is displaying, visual graphics from specific tags. We have a line chart, which has got some trend pens and Gantt charts for our discrete values. We have a time and state chart. So for our discrete data, we have the 0 and 1 values, as well as the minutes that it was in over, I think it's the last hour. Here we have a column chart, and this column chart is using a slice by feature. So each grouping of columns is sliced by a discrete variable. And so in this case, it's the pump status. So if the pump is stopped, if the pump is running, this column chart is grouped up accordingly. And we'll investigate this a little bit further. And then the last two, discrete summary of some of our discrete variables, number of transitions, and then percentage of on and off. And then our status board, which is kind of an outline of all of our tags that we have in our search, and maybe current values and a snapshot of maybe like the trend history over this hour time range. And so if you can kind of assume, right, this dashboard can be customized and rearranged and resized, kind of how you see how different sizing of all these tiles. Any questions on the dashboard? Okay, great. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to go into our mixer line chart. So go ahead and select that line chart, and you'll get into kind of this individual content view. So you can hide specific trend pens by clicking on their name in the legend, like so. And up over here on the right-hand side, we have this kind of square with a plus icon on it for adding comments. So if you select it once with a left click and then click anywhere on the graph, we can create a comment. I'm going to do it for the agitator speed, and any kind of user-defined text, speed to low. And then again, similar, if you're familiar with our historian tools, you can make it visible to yourself or your entire team. And so I'll go ahead and do that. And so if you're following along and adding comments, as it eventually we'll come back to this and we'll refresh the page and we'll see, if you've set that comment to my team, everybody's comment on that single piece of content. If you're to select it, you can see, select that icon, you can see details related to that comment, as well as being able to edit or even remove that comment. One of the other things is, I mentioned in the PowerPoint, is multi-conditional alerts. So 2 icons over, we have this gray alarm bell. And if we do the same kind of mechanism before, left click the alarm bell, click anywhere on the graph, and we get this alert definition window. So here's where we define our multi-conditional alerts. And so we have our 7 tags here. But we don't want, maybe we don't want a conditional alert that's this complicated, or multifaceted, I should say. And so we can just click on these trash can icons and delete all but the level and the temperature tags. So I should just have 2 tags left. And so the conditions that I'm going to set first for my level tag, I'm going to say is greater than, and then give it a value, and this value is going to be 95. And then the temperature tag, I'm going to change the condition from is equal to is between, and the values here I'm going to choose are 115 and I'll say 21. And so once I've defined those conditions, it's when both of these are true, not just when any one of them is true. I'm going to go ahead and click next. And so here's where we define our actions, how we want the alert to be notified to certain individuals and how. So this check mark is going to send a push notification via that mobile app on your phone. And then here's where I can define email addresses. I know one of, maybe I wanted to say to workshop plus 11 as well. I don't know if that's one of you guys, but it's going to send an email to myself as well as to this user as well. And now if you click on this down arrow to the right of that last email address, we can further define the behavior of that action. So right here, the first line item is we have a deadband. In this case, it's just 60 seconds. We have a kind of a action description. Maybe it's you know, some written text of, you know, how I want somebody to next steps for the individuals who receive this alert, and then defining, you know, the trigger of the specific condition. So right now it's just when the condition is true, but let's say I wanted to just change it to only that instant when it changes from to true, from that 0 to 1 instance. So from here, we'll go ahead and click next. And you'll get an alert, you know, do you want to send it to email addresses? Since I'm using my work email, I'm going to just say no thanks. But if I wanted that to send an email, I would just click that send alerts button. So lastly, we just, you know, summarize our alert. So we can call it, you know, Tim's mixer alert. And here's the first introduction to assets within AVEVA Insight. So if you're familiar with the system platform, assets work very similarly to what you might see in the plant model. So that plant model, within that plant model, an area or an asset can be represented by a physical area or a physical asset. And so I want to put this alert specifically towards my mixer 100. And there's we'll explore the asset page and show how all this is linked up. So if you're a system platform user, AVEVA Insight automatically brings in your plant model and generates this asset hierarchy tree. But don't worry if you're not a system platform user, or not even a AVEVA user for SCADA. You can create this asset hierarchy within AVEVA Insight itself and its own tag dictionary. And then if you want, you can give it a description of the alert, and then click finish. And so it'll give you a summary. It'll say it's saved. And if I click on this alarm bell, so as I re-landed on this mixer line chart, I think this is mine, and this might be somebody else's, student 16, so whoever you are. So if I go and click show alerts, I'll see the alert that I just configured. This is the alert that I configured for in the morning session. Any questions about conditional alerts? Something to note in that action section when we were defining it, if I had set up that logic app that I was talking about for that custom alert action, that custom alert action would appear as like a checkbox in that action section of when we were defining the alert. So before we move on to different types of content, I want to kind of touch on how you can share and save data. So you saw that I've already created or saved some of these pieces of content to AVEVA Insight, and that was done by using this save button. And so we used a mixer keyword that helps us generate our dashboard, and then I made it visible to everybody and assigned it to, again, using that asset hierarchy model, to that mixer 100. But I want to point out this, click the check mark, enable shareable link. So I've enabled that, and I'll close out of this. And what that allows us to do is we can share a specific URL for this piece of content on an external web page. So we click this embed icon, and we get this URL that we can copy and paste into a new browser. And there we have, been able to access this content without having to have a login to our AVEVA Insight solution. So you can share content with either, third parties or, for water customers. We've had a customer of ours embed it on their public web page for certain information. And so it's a way to share that kind of data. You can do this with dashboards as well. And then the last thing is downloading to Excel or Excel Online. And this is share button is sharing within for team members within our AVEVA Insight solution via this URL or an email. Any questions so far? Okie doke. So if we go to this content button up at the top, if we click the drop down arrow, it'll bring up all of our pieces of content that I've previously saved. And so one of the things that I want to explore is this process graphic. So go ahead and select that. And I'm going to try to refresh it. Okay. I don't know if any of you guys are also seeing a blank screen like mine, but let's see what's happening. Maybe a combination of SkyTap and AVEVA Insight. Huh. I lost all my content. So that's okay. So if, just to show you how oh, there it is. Huh, finally appeared. Okay. So good, that's a relief. Here we have our discrete values and graphics, and then our analog values in the middle. So discrete's on the outside and analogs on the inside. And so how you can edit this is click this edit pen. And we'll go kind of explain what goes into creating this process graphic. So what we have, it's basically composed of three components. The background, either image or color. So if I wanted to choose just a solid color, I could. It's made up of what we call content cards, and these are these background rectangular objects. And then it's made up of the individual graphics themselves, which are associated to a tag. So something to note is as you create things, you want to first format the first object first, and then as you bring over more objects, it'll remember those previously created settings. So for example, I think an easy way to explain this is with the content cards. So if I drag over a color, let's say yellow, and maybe resize it, and I'll change the shade to be a dark yellow, almost orange, and then maybe make some transparency. So we've kind of got some settings that we've already created, but if we were to drag over another color, maybe a light blue, it'll bring over those same characteristics that we've defined previously. So that's what I mean by kind of, if you want to keep things the same, define it once and then bring over the same type of content or graphic. So I'll go ahead and delete those. The same thing applies for the tags, except the only caveat is that they're either discrete or analog specific. So my discrete configuration is the same as my analog configuration. So let's go ahead and, if you're following along, let's go ahead and make some changes and just see how that's done. So if we select maybe our inlet tag, you can click this edit button. And so you can edit things individually right here. If I click modify, I can choose a different graphic type. So maybe I want it this like blue, or not blue, but just a square icon, color indicator to the left of my value. Oh, I think I already had that. I'll change something different. Let's do the rectangular box. So it'll format that. We can resize it. But there's another option is if I click properties, right, I can format colors and everything from one pane of glass as opposed to, sequencing all my changes. You can just do it from one pane. Maybe change the color to white. And the same thing can be applied for my analog values. So right now I have my level tag, and if I click modify, I have my analog different types of graphics. So maybe I want my level to be maybe a 3/4 circle, or and maybe I want the text color to be white. And there's my new analog graphic. One of the other things that's kind of unique to the live trend pen is you can define the trend duration. So instead of 5 minutes, maybe I want 15 minutes, and it'll change there, or I'll just change it back to 5 minutes. The same kind of concept within a traditional trend pen. Any questions about editing, creating these process graphics? So some of use cases or kind of real life examples of how we've helped customers use these graphics for two different scenarios. So one for operators and one for more management supervisor levels. So for those operators, what we've done is we've taken screenshots of those SCADA operator screens and overlaid these live graphics over those still images. So kind of recreating that look and feel of the SCADA screen that they typically see on site. They pull it up from their phone or the browser from wherever remote location they might be. They kind of have a very similar familiar feel to what where the data is, what it should look like, that sort of thing. So we've done things like that for customers. On a supervisor level, maybe it's a high level picture of the facility and it's more high level KPIs associated to the entire process. So we can save our changes by just clicking this check mark. And so it'll give us a notification that we saved and the data has been updated. And so the last piece of content, I want to show you guys before we go into the asset page is if we go to, again, the content tab up at the top and this column chart. And go ahead and select 1 hour. If the data doesn't populate, just go ahead and select 1 hour. It kind of refreshes it. And as I mentioned before, right, we have our analog tags being sliced by this discrete pump variable. And so every time it changed from running to stop, right, we have a separate grouping of value or columns for our individual analog tags. So if I make, hopefully if I can make this, let's see, 1350. Trying to shorten the time range to make it a little bit more visible. There we go. So we have stopped, running, and then associated columns. And you can even drill in and see how the trend kind of interacted over that slice, or that slice by. So this is the temperature tag. So we'll click on that orange bar and drill in with this trend icon, and we'll view that specific section in a trend pen. So we'll go back and then go back to our column chart. So different ways to view the data. And that slice by variable can be a string variable as well. It doesn't have to be a discrete tag. So if we go to this, if there are any questions, and we'll go into the asset page. Great. Okay. So on the hamburger icon of the top left, we'll go and select that and click Assets. So this asset page is, instead of searching for or defining things by groups of tags, this kind of compiles related tags under specific assets. And as I said, assets can be a specific area, like a city, or even a physical asset, like a specific mixer. And that asset hierarchy is either brought in from System Platform or defined within AVEVA Insight. And we can kind of show that if we have time at the end. But if we click on this Mixer 100, we land on our asset page. And so our asset page, we have our asset defining info. So what this is the specific area that I've namespace that I've identified for it, some keywords. So this is to deal with the mixing process. So I felt mixing was a good keyword. Any kind of logical description, geolocation coordinates in decimal degrees, as well as a time zone. And this does apply daylight savings times as well. And so this column chart is here only because it was the last piece of content that I visited that was associated with this asset. If I visited that line chart last, or the process graphic, that would appear here. We have an individual news feed. As information gets displayed, or this news feed starts to, collecting data and understanding the data, it'll spit out asset specific news information right here. Because we've defined the asset location, we have the asset on a map. So this is in Southern California in Irvine. We can see how many alerts have been defined for this asset, in this case 2. And down at the bottom, we can see journal entries, electronic journal entries, and all the different pieces of content that have been created associated with this Mixer 100. So up at the top right, you have asset actions. So this is where one of the places where you can add journal entries or alerts. But the difference is that it's automatically going to be associated to this specific asset. So think of a journal entry as like the comment that we just did before, but as opposed to making a comment on a specific tag, it's a comment on a specific asset. a little bit of nuance there. But how to do it, go ahead and click Add Journal Entry. And in the title, you can give it, after lunch comment. And test, some logical note, and date and time, and I'll click save. So if I scroll down, I've added my 4th journal entry, and if I click on that tile, I can see all the different comments that have been made. Some of these were made by students beforehand, and student 15 just made one as well. And you can see, if I expand it, details of that comment. So what the asset page does is consolidate information and really does aggregate, related information onto one pane of glass, as opposed to navigating between different types of content or kind of grouping the, finding the tags and making sure they're all related. This all does it for you. So are there any questions about the asset page? Okay. Something that I'd like to just, before we hit that near the hour, the Insight Suite. So this grid icon, and if I click administration, here's where you can define a lot of different things associated with it. So for users, this is where I add and delete users or change role permissions and that sort of thing. Adding CSV files or JSON files, I can do it through here. I'll investigate this in just a second. Your REST API or integration settings, as well as webhooks. And for this wastewater specific workshop, we'll skip efficiency. But here's where we can define those custom alert actions that I was talking about. So we click plus, we define the name of what the, maybe a description, that logic app URL that's associated with your app that we created, and maybe some hints. We click add. And then lastly, we have our download section, which for those wanting that DMZ secure link, right, that proxy software, that's free to download from here as well. So pretty quickly, I want to just tap into the tag dictionary, and we'll go ahead and click in and log into my Microsoft account. And here it'll do use Excel with this configuration assistant. And so here I have all of my, I think it's just 12 tags, right? Yeah, 12 tags. And so here's where I can, if I want to delete them, I can delete them here. I can assign aliases. So as tag names can be traditionally, ambiguous. So I can define my aliases here. And then this is the location column is what I was talking about, the asset hierarchy model. And so all these specific tags can have their asset hierarchy. And so if I didn't have system platform, which is the data source for this project, I could have manually inputted this into these individual cells, as well as the geolocation coordinates. And then you'll have all the metadata that was brought in from the data source, in this case, system platform. So any questions? So something to note is all the help documentation, product news, some videos that AVEVA posts are here. We, Wonderware California, routinely and frequently post content surrounding AVEVA Insight on our YouTube channel as well. One of the things with dashboards, I guess, is if we share and we can click share link, this will give a live link to the dashboard. So the dashboard will still refresh and populate. So, you know, a use case would be to put the dashboard maybe on a central, you know, large screen, and you know, those KPIs would, you know, refresh and you know, as the data comes in. So we can just copy this link, post it into an external web page. And here we have our mixer dashboard. So here we can see we have our 2 active alerts. Oh, maybe they've been cleared. So I think we've hit the end of that first session. I'll stick around for questions. If not, we'll take a 5-minute break. So at 2:30, we'll come back. But if you have any questions, comments, let me know. So there was a request to kind of go over the slice by feature again. So while everybody's returning, I'll kind of recap that. So the slice, but how it kind of, to further elaborate on this, so how this works is within my group of tags that I've searched for, or they brought into my search, I need at least some analog tags and at least one either discrete or string tag a part of this search. And you know, normally with column charts, or you know, you pick your, you know, your summary statistic calculation. In this case, I've just chosen average, and you know, maybe I want to do every 15 minutes, right? And it'll give me, you know, columns for every 15-minute interval. But if I want to change that x-axis to be a discrete variable, I choose it to be event, and you know, pick the variable that I'd like. In this case, I chose the pump status variable, so when it stopped or running. Now, over those time series sections, as I said, you can drill in and see how that data interacted or was depicted over that specific section. So I hope that kind of clarified how those column charts work. If not, we can, Wendy, we can set up a time and kind of talk about it some more.